It's recording. Yay, can never tell. So the holidays are over and I wanted to get back into posting videos. So today I want to do kind of a setup of drawing grapes so that you understand the steps that happen before you ever get to color and you get to the point where it becomes what I would call fun because I love color. But the work is in the graphite, it's in the drawing, it's in creating the drawing that you're going to actually color. I want to share my screen. Okay, so you're looking at a PowerPoint presentation that says composition. So understanding what you're seeing and get clarity before you draw. We're going to go over color, volume and form, surface and shape, how to use pattern recognition and distribution on a drawing, and your setup equals your viewer's orientation. So that's it. And we're going to do all of that disguised as drawing grapes. So these are the grapes that we're going to be drawing, some of these, not all of these. And what we're going to be concentrating and focusing on is shape, light source, and patterns. So shape, all this back here is part of a slide, part of a book I'm putting together that is going to, it's not a book, it's like glorified handouts. But, you know, just to give this context to things, and that's kind of what I'm teaching out of this, creating that as I go. So here's what we're focusing on: shape, light source, patterns. So the first thing, what shape is it? And when we're dealing with grapes, they're usually round, circle, or you're going to get possibly an oval. Geometric shapes, organic shapes, the closest shape it is, it's going to be a circle. So shapes are not about form. There's no volume, no mass, no weight in shapes. It's only a surface. So shapes identify the basic shapes: simplicity, symbolic drawing, clear communication, individual or group, surface area, and definitely not form. So all I'm looking for on this could be a tree. It could be a sailboat that's sinking. Here's the water, calm sea. But you know what I mean? This is really nondescript. It's symbolic drawing. It's very clear. It's clear communication to the shape of it. It's not clear in terms of meaning or anything like that. Individual, in this picture, it's an individual. It's one thing. In our picture, we're going to have circles because there's more than one grape. So that's where shape plays in. We also want to look at light source. So here's our basic shape on this picture, the light source here. When we have a light source and know where it is, we know what time of day it is, that helps us know where the shadows fall. Strong shadows, overcast, black and white, gradient blend, 2D to 3D, this is where form comes in. So a light source is going to tell you so much information. Strong shadows usually tell you it's a bright, bright, sunny day. So black and white, this is very grayscale in here. And I realize all my drawings here are. So black and white are missing from here. And that's part of the deal why these are so fadey looking. So if these would have been great black shadows, you're like, yes, that's what I'm looking for in a shadow, is that nice dark black. So this is the information that you get: reflected light, cast shadow, undershadow, foreshortening, shading, horizon line. All these things that when you look for in here, you may have noticed them before, but you didn't have these names for them. And so now when we look at something like a grape, here it's a circle, but it may be foreshortened. We may be seeing it tip, so it's more of an oval. It's a circle shape, but this isn't quite a perfect circle. It's more of an oval. Undershadow, this might be a reflected shadow. This is probably an undershadow. We can tell our light source is here. So that's all the information that you get from understanding where your light source is. At this point, you're just observing. So what repeats are patterns. Our minds are so pattern oriented that when things repeat, we'll fill in the blanks on one thing that we know and we'll fill in on other things. So sometimes you can have three things together. And if you're very careful about establishing form on the first shape, the viewer will automatically afford that to your other shapes. It allows you a little bit of leeway when you're drawing things that are complex. And one of the things is on this first grape right here, there's this beautiful dark line that exists around it. It's actually a dark line that's on the grape behind it. It's right here, and it's also right here. That line really helps the viewer understand that this is a circle shape. That really helps. And when we draw it later, I'll show you what that looks like again. This grape doesn't have it, and this grape doesn't have it. If you took this grape out of context and just had this, and this were blacked out so you didn't get this hint, it would be hard to tell if this was flat or if it was rounded. This highlight helps, but without that dark line here or on this one, it's harder to tell on these two if they're flat, a surface, or if they're more of a round form like this is giving us. Because this gives us so much information on form, we're willing to afford these other two things form, even though they don't have that information. So this is why patterns, things that are noteworthy, things that are similar, they allow for differentiation. They also allow for the specifics of this, not that. In this case, this, a circle, not any other shape. So what do we know now? Just from looking at this, we know that there's circles here. These are actually little teeny pentagons that connect. These are lines. So when we break this down into geometrics and into shapes, this is what we have. Lines and the lines, because a lot of people don't think about lines when you think about grapes, because you're not thinking about the stems. You're only thinking about the grapes. So these lines will turn into cylinders when they're shaded. So here's stems research. I had to go into Google. Yes, I pulled grapes off stems a million times, but I never paid attention to the stem. So when it comes to drawing it, I'm like, okay, I get it, but I don't really get it. So I had to go back and look at it. So once I have all this information, now is when I started to put together graphite and start to put together a form. So I used my blender. I put down a big pile of graphite like this with a pencil, used a blender, got the form and went back in. You can tell my light source is over here somewhere because it's light here and dark here, and blended it. So blending with graphite, this is one of the essential skills that you're going to need that I think really helps when you're setting up a drawing, because it's helping you get the gradient blend and form how to make lines look like cylinders, which is going to be our stems, adding shadow, that gives us volume. Form, how to shade a circle, how to make it look round. And how to do these things are the gradient blends. So that's what this is. Here's the darkest point. Here's the lightest point. So when we go and analyze something, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the light and the dark, because in between the dark and the light are all these beautiful grays that are in here. So when working with graphite, we have the ability to take a blender and use a blender and just blend out these colors into this dark to light transition or a gradient blend. If we had to break it down into the color or into the graphite pencils, we could do an 8B, a 5B, a 3B, a 2, and go lighter. This is kind of a silly way to do it in graphite, but when you think about it, this is how we have to do it in colored pencil. So when you make the shift from being a great drawer, can I say that? A person that draws in graphite, you have black and white, but in between, your whole grayscale is what translates into your color choices when you use color. So people want to skip through this, and I get it, because I am not a big fan of graphite. It's not my favorite thing. I love colors so much, but I do understand why you need graphite, why you'd want to work things out in graphite first. So here's where I start figuring it out. I use a 2B, a 4B, a blender, eraser, gradient blends. That's how to make this shading happen and how to make this form, how to make it look like a little cylinder instead of just a 2D shape. At this point, I'm looking at the grapes, but I'm also using all the tricks I know about form. I'm remembering all of that. Under shadow, cast shadow, I have all that available because I understand what light does on a subject, not this particular grape, but when we talked about this and the shading that comes here, but most especially this, When I know all of these things, that's how I can go in and shade these, because I understand what I'm looking at and I understand the names. So this is partly what I go over in my class as well, almost every time, because this is important. Once you start understanding this, it just translates to everything you do and you don't have to think about it every single time. So on this now, form is the shape of a circle and how to shade a circle. Light source, that tells me where my gradients, where my light is, where my dark is, how to begin and end that. And pattern is one grape does not have to do all the work. Many circles give the viewer clues. And that's what I meant. Here's a dark line on this one. These, because of necessity, they're up against white paper. So you don't get such a difference here, but right here you can see I skimped. I didn't put that black line in, but it's still there. It's back here on this. This may not have such a nice round shape, but this one does. There's that nice dark line. Okay. Also, can you tell at this point when I was sketching, I really have no idea what's going on in those stems. And if this were a finished drawing, this is kind of a very haphazard, it's a weird X shape. It's going to kill my drawing, that. So I know right there that, okay, I can have a drawing, I can have this, and if it's good enough, I can go ahead with this. But what you're looking for is a clear understanding of what you see and how to translate it through the value scale. I'm happy with everything, not overly happy with the stems though on this. So color begins another level of relationship with your drawing. If you have a problem with form, you have to correct it at the form level. If you don't like what you're seeing in the rough pencil sketch, throwing color at it won't improve it. My point here, this so shows I have no clue really what's going on about stems or the insertion points. What is this? So it's kind of clear I don't get stems. So I go back and, oh, wow, this is a little pentagon here. And you can see I go back in, redraw it, and start get a better understanding. My mouth isn't working tonight. On how this looks, how to translate this better, so that when I'm showing this to my viewer, they're getting a real clear understanding of what it is that I'm seeing. So it's at this level of understanding that I would start thinking, okay, now color. So what do you know about grapes? When you look at a photograph or actual grapes, you start seeing round, green, or the color that they are. Are they cold? They're probably not hot. Firm, soft, ripe, unripe. This is when all the meaningful information that you understand about your subject starts pouring in. Before this point, it's always been like kind of left brain, more analytical. You're not really looking at it as a fruit that you could eat. You're looking at it as a shape, an object that you're trying to communicate into a form on a piece of paper. So once you start thinking color, it becomes fun, because now you're having, not that graphite's not fun, but fun in the sense that your right brain is able to start getting engaged here. It still is engaged, yes, certainly when you're shading and everything in graphite, but more so in color. And you start having more of a connection with things this way because they become more real. So you want to look at the grapes that you're looking at and start assembling a color palette. And these are the colors that I chose. I've got Goldenrod, which is my light color, apple green, which is my medium, grass green is my dark, mulberry is my pop color because I just love throwing something unusual in, and white. Those are all regular Prismacolor colored pencils. For blending, I have white, which is a regular Prismacolor colored pencil. I also have a Verithin white. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And now I want to go, and I'm not going to worry so much about all those cast shadows and under shadows. I just want to show you how I go ahead and shade and start working on that. So this is what I've been working on in classes. And so I've got this random glob of grapes going on. But what I wanted to show you was I have this one already started. And the reason I'm using the gold tone underneath the goldenrod is because if I just go in with apple green or my grass green, it goes so blue. And I'm using a goldenrod as an undertone to kind of calm those colors down so they're not so blue. There's not a lot of good color choices in Prismacolors in terms of greens that don't go very, very yellow or don't go very, very blue or olive. So I could use olive greens. I'm just finding that by using an undercolor, I prefer that. I like how it shows through and it gives a little more depth. So I'm using Goldenrod here. I put down a layer, probably about this thickness, over the top. And because when you have a circle shape and there's a light source here, this is going to be dark, this is going to be midtones, and this is going to be light. And I actually could erase out a little bit of this because I've been going over it so much. But that gives me light. So that would be the gradient scale. And you can see that would go across this way if I put that scale here. Here would be my darkest color here, which is this, my medium, which is going to be this, and then light. So in graphite, as we said, that becomes a very easy blend, but in colored pencil, we have to use different colored pencils to try and make that blend. So my gradient scale then is going to be my light color. There's a question mark here because I'm not really sure what it's going to be. It's going to be a mixture of my apple green and my goldenrod. That's going to be my light color. My medium color is apple green and grass green is my dark. This looks really blue on my screen, but it's actually a kind of bright dark green. So once I have just a very basic coating down, I've left kind of a big white area because I know I'm going to have reflected light. So when these grapes were taken with the picture, there's a light source that kind of is right where my head is, where you're looking at that. Like if our faces were light sources, we're either standing right over them. So we're getting this lovely light source here. On your piece of paper though, it's a great idea to have a secondary light source. So here is my on the paper light source. If I just use this as a light source, the shadow is going to be on the underside. And it's not going to help me in my drawing. It's not going to help you, the viewer, understand what I'm saying because I don't have ability to use darks because the shadow is underneath. If I put a light source here, that gives me another ability down here to put a shadow that helps you, the viewer, understand that what I'm telling you is this is a form. It's not just a shape. It's got a three-dimensionalness to it. And that's what I'm trying to help you with right now. I'm not worried about color now. I'm worried about form. So even with my yellow, I know that, okay, sun here, I know there's going to be a shadow that's falling back here. So I'm going to make that darker back here. And I know that it's going to come a little bit underneath this because they're not quite touching. And do you see how even if it's yellow and it's kind of a weird color, it still is pushing this one up and away because the dark shadow pushes this lightness up. This is now looking like it's forward. This one is behind it. So the same thing with this back here. I'm going to pop this one in as well since this one's cut off. I know there's going to be a shadow because this is casting a shadow on it. It's going to be darker in here. And it's also because I've drawn grapes all day. So I could go back to my reference picture, but that was my daughter calling. She'll be thrilled that I just hung up on her. So that puts the dark in here. I'm going to go ahead and put a light coating all the way across on this. And I'm going to darken it just a little bit right back in here because that really helps push this one forward. So now I'm going to go in. This is my medium. So this is my apple green. I'm going to trace a real light line right along the circumference of this and right along back here. Because this is my mid-tone, I want to put it in this mid area. This is my really big reflective highlight. So this is in the middle of my mid-tone, but I really don't want to cover it with this green. So I'm putting my mid-tone in right over the top, and I'm doing about the same level of pressure, but I'm going over it twice. So I'm doing kind of these circles, but each time I go, I'm going in that middle, so I'm filling it in as I go. So that I'm just giving this a light coat. I'm kind of bringing it up to the green that I have here. I'm not going too much into my real dark area or what's going to be my darker shadow area. I would normally, if I were just doing this, I would go all the way over, but I just want you to start thinking of the idea of if it's a gradient blend, you've got to have the dark, the middle, and the light, and that's what's going to happen back here. I'm going to be able to press harder and put more pressure down because this is where the darkness is going to be back here. I'm lightening up, making it a gradient blend. There's no harsh lines between these. I just want this to blend into the center. So I'm going back a little and blending this in, and I don't want this yellow over here. So I'm putting a really light layer down here. And because there's not a lot of differentiation between this and my midtones, I know I have to bump up those midtones a bit. They need to be a little bit darker because you can't see that my light is light because these are so light. So by going over that midtone area, now I don't have a dark area really. This is almost darker than back here. That's why I have the grass green. So I'm going in here. This is the grass green. And I'm going over this whole area back here. I'm going to take a Verithin. There's two different ways that you can burnish, or that I like to burnish. Because you've got the ochre or the goldenrod down here, if I'm happy with the way this looks, this is a Verithin white. So this doesn't have a lot of wax to it. It works more like an H pencil. So it's hard. And it doesn't put down wax. So what I'm doing is I'm using it as a blender. I'm covering the surface, all the goldenrod on here, and I'm burnishing it down into the paper. It's going to get rid of a lot of those white dots that you can see. It's also kind of going to seal this. It's kind of going to put a coating of white over my goldenrod. I'm going to erase this because that was a drawing line that I didn't need. And that's hard. When you draw in Verithin or in the regular wax, this is going to be really hard. If this were a finished drawing, this is going to be a nightmare to get out. I would almost have to stick another grape or something in here because it stains the paper. So another reason why I tend to draw and sketch things out either in a light Verithin, so I'm not putting the wax down, or in graphite so I can easily erase it. So I'm going to go in now. I just put all this dark. And instead of covering this, I went over this with white Verithin. I'm going to go over this with a full wax Verithin. I'm doing this same thing. I'm blending it. I'm using this as a blender. I'm going into my white center area. It looks like an olive. In fact, these all look like olives because the context isn't here yet. So now that I have that done, it compressed it all down. It kind of flattened out all my colors. So I'm going back in. This is with the apple green, closing down that really big highlight so it's not quite so big. It's allowing this green to really kind of be much brighter than it was because it's going on over the white. So I'm starting to get a really lovely grape color with this. On the screen, they look so incredibly dark. And I would love to be able to figure out how to get a camera to actually show these colors accurately. So I'm going back in and I'm putting the dark. This is my grass green again, because I went over this with white. I don't want these colors to be so drab back here. So I'm going in behind this grape and I'm putting in these darks underneath so that I can get my shadow. And that's really going to help push this out. So I'm bringing this in over here and always making that gradient blend. If I put a line down, I have to slowly blend it into the colors that are around me. It's also right here. You can see how it's kind of blunted out this one, how this one really looks like it's flattening here. So I'm going to take my white, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to push this one right back out over it again. So I'm actually blending my white. It's dropping right into the green and it's picking up, which actually is my fun pop color, the mulberry here. But you can see how I just pushed that right back out. Now this one definitely looks like it's sitting on top. And I'm going to blend that in because there's a little reflected light from this. So that's all right to stay there. Down here, going to bring that over. I'm always just blending where I've just been. So I'm getting that look still of roundness on this. So even though we're not working on this, by doing that, do you see how this has kind of made this just look, it stops. You're like, what is this? So I've got to go back in and just correct, just fill in a little because I know this is messing with form now. If I start removing things back here, say this area, which is kind of what I did, I turned it light. If I take this out, this is starting to mess with your ability to see that what I'm trying to show you is a circle. I'm taking out shadow information down here, and that has to stay. So even though there might be reflected light, I need to put that darkness back in down here. Even if I leave a bit of reflected light here, as long as you're seeing, nope, this is a round shape in the most of it, you're going to afford that to these other shapes. This has no line. We were talking before about one grape doesn't have to do all the work. And I mean that this one is now starting to look round. I put a little of the mulberry in here. And so that's why you're getting this color wash because I haven't really blended this out yet. But this is looking nice and round. This one is. This one, notice what happens when I just go in with even a teeny line along here and blend it. That helps you, the viewer, so much see that what I'm telling you is this is a round form. If I go down and put a little more darkness in, and the reason I like the idea of mulberry or a pop color on this is because mulberry is such a bright purple. When I add this down here though, it really acts as kind of just a dimmer switch. It turns all this down. You still can see it in here, so it does give a really nice pop. I can't think of a better word for that. I'm going in, I'm using an eraser to blend that mulberry because I really don't want you to see it as a color. I just want that darkness, and the same thing right here. I'm going to blend that out. So it's constantly going back and forth between what you see on your picture and what's actually happening in your drawing. The colors on the picture, the grapes that you're looking at versus the colors that you're actually able to use when you're using the Prismacolors. So I'm right now going in with my eraser and I'm just kind of blending out in circles this highlight area. So I've made it a little bit bigger. I'm going to put some dots over here. I'm going to erase out just random little dots I'm erasing out in here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to go back in with my mid-tone here. I'm still sitting on top of white. I'm putting this back in a little. I want to close that down a little. And now I'm going to take my white again. I want to really push out, get rid of all these little. Now I'm going back in my white in this area. Overall with this grape, happy with the color. It's still a little too dark. This is my white. I'm really pushing hard and I'm blending all of this together, not going all the way into those shadow areas, but I am going up into them a bit. This is adding all the light. It's bringing my colors back. It's making it look very grapey. So once I have that in, I can go back in and put just a teeny bit, and you'll see on your paper how the yellow really adds a believability to it that isn't there if you don't have that yellow color as an availability to use. A lime green wouldn't really work with this, but this allows me really to kind of go over and I'm adding it a bit here and there. And then because I know on this one, there's going to be a shadow back here, that's where that dark line is going to go. So you can see when I add that shadow, which is actually a shadow that is going to be back here on this grape, it really pushes this one forward. And again, knowing that my darkness is going to come in here, I don't really have to worry about this one standing out because I could even go in with this one and I could underneath put that shadow in down here in the mulberry because I know I want it that dark. And watch what happens when I put this bright pink color down. Now when I go in with this dark, I can get an even darker look down here than I've gotten on these because I stuck that color in underneath. So when you're adding color, there's so many different ways that you can play with this. And the color is the fun part because that is honestly more right-brained, more the ability just to grab things and to see a color palette and go, oh, this would look so beautiful in here. And I think that's really what needs to happen is when you're doing the color is when you should be able to just grab what you want and know that your drawing is sound, that in general you understand it and you understand it well enough that you're willing to translate it into color. Because you'll be a lot happier, even if it's a practice exercise, you'll be happier if it looks good in the drawing stage, because then you're like, you're done with it. And it's like, yeah, I may need to tweak the stems a little or go back in for a little more research on that. But at least 90% of it you're loving and your left brain isn't criticizing you, which believe me is a wonderful thing. So thank you for watching, and I will make more videos soon. I love it.